And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, joined today by somebody who it took way too long to get on the show the first time he came on. And I promised him then we aren't going to wait that long again. We said we would come and talk about Ahsoka, and that's eventually what we're going to get to here later. He does Hoops Tonight for the Volume. He also has the Two Sons pod that he does with his buddy that I have enjoyed quite a bit as well. Jason Timpf, thank you very much for hopping on, man. You ready? We're right around the corner. We're almost there.
Anthony, what's up, man? I'm super excited. And first of all, we have like legit media day taking place today for the Thunder and the Mavericks. So
Yeah.
NBA basketball's here, man. It's here. And thank God, because this offseason has probably been the slowest and most boring offseason that I can remember, certainly since I started covering the league. But I mean, it's been probably at least 5 years since we've had this boring of an offseason.
Yeah, we were talking before we went live, and I threw out the idea that like the NBA is really banking on parity, right? We saw last year how tight the playoff run was. We saw how wide open the postseason was, where the Lakers and the Heat made their crazy runs to the conference finals and eventually to the finals. And the notion that like, yeah, we want, I think in Adam Silver's NBA, he wants every fan base to feel like at the beginning of the season, their team has like kind of a puncher's chance. Maybe a couple teams going into like the Blazers fans, I would imagine, don't think they have much to root for in terms of the title, but they will have Scoot to root for, and Spurs fans will have Wemby to root for. And I do think though that what the gamble there is because they're with that parity and there being no real super team that like no proven super team, that there's no team to really hate. Like all these fan bases just kind of sitting back. We're just like, all right, Indiana fans are like, well, maybe this year's the year that we go from like mediocrity to being pretty good. And we don't really hate the Lakers, don't really hate the Warriors. And the Nuggets won, and they're great. They're going to be really good again next year, but they're not really hateable. So yeah, I'm really curious with how this offseason played out and the lack of momentum going into the season, how that's going to play. Also, like it's so not the NBA. It's like you made the point. This is so different from how we have covered this. It's such a different league than the one that we have covered. I don't know if it's like shock value to what we're doing as well that we have to get used to. I don't know. It all feels kind of weird, but I'm happy that we're finally here.
Yeah, ideally you'd have both, right? Like ideally you'd have parity and teams at the top that are hateable, right? And like I was doing my power rankings, and I think there are 19 teams out of the 30 that could legitimately convince themselves that they have a puncher's chance to at least win their conference, which is crazy. And like you mentioned, the other 11 teams all have exciting, young, talented cores to watch. You know what I mean? And so like that part is fine, but I agree with you. You want to have the type of galvanizing rooting against that type of entity at the top of the league. And hopefully that ends up being, in a season like this, the Lakers and the Suns are good examples of that. The Celtics kind of capture that vibe. So hopefully, ideally, you get both. But at the end of the day, like it's just a weird summer because like last year we just had crazy engagement from the California fan bases. Like Lakers fans were constantly pulling their hair out, myself included, trying to beg for a Russell Westbrook trade. Like do you remember every single day last summer was like, is today the day? And it was this palpable, like, and then we got to the week before training camp and the reports started to come out that they were going to wait. And then it like caused this whole other thing where everyone's even more angry. And then you're like watching preseason games and watching early season games. It was like such a classic engagement from the Laker fan base in a negative way, which is so funny because like when it comes to the NBA, typically, and I've seen this with my show, when I'm covering the league, when a lesser known team starts to have success, that's when their fan base engages, and then we hit bigger numbers. Like we hit big numbers covering the Nuggets last year in the playoffs. Why? Because they're doing good and they're engaged and they're but like the Lakers, it's weird. It's like the opposite.
So much
it's
hate
like
watching.
This is by far the best Laker team and Laker roster coming into the season since the year after they won the championship, right? Like this is the year that they have those expectations. I have them pretty high in my power rankings, and like everyone's just kind of chilling. you know?
Yeah.
And then the Warriors are kind of in that reverse position now where they're adding all of the old veteran players and they're coming into the season with gaping holes on their roster. It's kind of interesting what a difference a year makes, man, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I remember last year I compared the whole Russ situation to like watching a car accident happen in a parking lot where like two cars are like backing out of their spot at the same time. And you're like, somebody's going to notice, right? Like, you guys know he's still on the roster, right? You guys know you have 33 6'3" guys on your team, right? Like eventually, you're gonna address it, right? And then they didn't. And then like you're talking about, there was so much like hate watching and hate listening from Lakers fans this year. And it was funny, you fast forward a year to now, and all summer I had been told that Christian Wood was going to happen. He was just waiting to see how things are going to play out in Miami, waiting to see how things are going to play out potentially in Phoenix or whatever if they traded Ayton. But like at the end of the day, and he eventually said too in his kind of introductory presser, or maybe he said it on a pod, that he and Darvin Ham had been talking all summer. So like this was a really poorly kept secret. And it was funny when the Lakers eventually signed him, it really was a sign of how successful their offseason was, because I felt like people were getting themselves up in a hissy just because they hadn't had to this point. It's been a solid offseason. It's in my opinion, one of the deeper rosters in the NBA. And so when they signed Christian Wood, Lakers fans that I saw on Twitter were like, no, there it is. Holy shit.
What, did the Dame trade go down?
To the Milwaukee Bucks.
No way.
At Woj ESPN.
Oh,
breaking.
Man, you're kidding me. Do you think it was straight up for Drew Holiday? Oh my god,
that would seem to make sense. But Holiday just had like a big profile for their local paper there, saying he wanted to retire a Buck. So Lillard goes to Milwaukee as part of a 3-team deal with Drew Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, Tamani Kamara, and a 2029 unprotected Milwaukee first going to the Blazers. Phoenix lands.
3-team deal? Oh my god.
What the hell?
Dude, a bomb just went off in the NBA, man. What the hell? So Ayton's going to Milwaukee too?
Yeah.
No.
So
Ayton's got to be.
Ayton,
Ayton's
he's going to
Phoenix. Portland.
To Portland.
Phoenix gets Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. Okay, so Phoenix basically. Wow. Phoenix gave up Ayton for almost nothing.
I mean, they'd been hoping to do that. That's crazy. I mean, I guess Nurkic can kind of step in. I feel like they got worse, though. I feel like Phoenix got worse. Milwaukee's tough. I think they're going to miss Drew's defense.
Oh, my gosh. I love that deal. Because I was pitching a whole James Harden swap for Drew Holiday because of a pick and roll passer with Giannis. Oh my gosh, man. This is
do you think
overnight favorite, right? Dame and Giannis is overnight favorite, right?
It's up there. Do you think Giannis accepts being the short role? Like, do you think he accepts like being the screen setter and operating as the center of the universe from that in that capacity? Obviously, you still have Brook Lopez who can step out and hit threes. But to your point, if they just kind of spam Dame Giannis pick and rolls, or invert it on occasion and then have Dame picking and popping there and have Giannis throwing the pass over the top of whatever trap that they send, that is really difficult to defend. And it's funny, all summer I've been kind of thinking the East hasn't really gotten all that better, but this does reshape the East, right? Like it. Just talking off of look, obviously we didn't plan this. We were going to talk about the Lakers or whatever, but
we have to talk about this, man. Yeah. This is crazy.
But so my initial thought is that Milwaukee does vault to the top of the East. I don't know if it necessarily makes them better than the Nuggets, though. What do you think?
Okay, so specifically, that's a matchup that I like for Denver in a potential NBA Finals series, a team that just has a ridiculously good defensive backline, right? So we're talking Brook Lopez and Giannis. It's almost like the perfect structure for a defense to put Brook Lopez in single coverage on Jokic and to have such a freaky athlete behind. And Giannis is like one of the rare guys in the league that can offer help at the rim and also take away the lob pass to the basket or the kick out pass to the weak side corner. He's like an alien in that sense. So like that, as it pertains to a matchup with Denver, that's almost ideal because you're taking the perfect defensive front line to contain Jokic and you're combining it with an outrageously good pull-up shooter, which will force Nikola Jokic out way further out on screens than he's accustomed to. Well, he actually likes to come out on screens, but in a way that'll actually be able to punish him. As we've seen, the teams that have had the most success against Denver offensively have been teams like Golden State,
Warriors,
that have a ridiculously good set of quick guards that can beat people off the dribble and stuff, right? So in a weird way, this team is constructed to beat Denver because they have the defensive front line to hang with him and they've got the pull-up shooting and really just that two-man game combo, because that's the thing is like Giannis barreling down in 4-on-3s in the middle of the floor with Jokic out at the perimeter. Like, dude, I need the dust to settle because that's with Grayson Allen going out. There's a little bit of a hole at the 2 there. And I mean, who does that end up being? Javon Carter now or Pat Connaughton?
I guess.
Like so like that, I need to see the dust settle on this, but just purely from a basketball perspective, the core of Dame, Chris Middleton, Giannis, and Brook Lopez instantaneously becomes probably your like one of the best top 4s in the league, right up there with Phoenix, right? I mean, and in terms of two-way capability, potentially an even crazier level than that. That's wow, man. This came out of nowhere.
This is devastating for Miami, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, because Dame probably is happy.
That too. Yeah, I mean he's on a title team now, you know, which is what he's said. All he's cared about is winning, right? All he's said publicly is that we've seen the leaks and reports from his camp that have tried, and from Miami's camp that have really tried to get him to Miami. But in this case, if he's unhappy playing next to Giannis in Milwaukee, and also devastating for Miami is that this keeps Giannis happy, right?
Oh my gosh, because man.
They were hoping that, all right, if not this one, eventually they would just try for Giannis again. That takes that, I would imagine, off of the board. So this is probably, I can't think of a worst case scenario for Miami. They lost Gabe Vincent. They lost Max Strus. They are a worse team than they were last year when they were barely a play-in team. They went on that miraculous run because Jimmy Butler did crazy Jimmy Butler things. But banking on that again, with Jimmy Butler being a year older,
go for James Harden. Bring him down to the strip club capital of the world. You're our backup plan.
Can we televise him taking Pat Riley's fat challenges?
Yes.
I mean, that is crazy. But no, I love the point that you made about the ways that they can specifically go at Denver. How about in the East? Do you see them? Also, how does Dame handle this? Like, he has been like Damian Lillard kind of loyal to Miami throughout this entire process, but now all of a sudden he's going to Milwaukee. You have to think he's mostly happy, but also this isn't that Miami market that NBA players really, really love. It's the opposite. Milwaukee is.
It's definitely not the market that Dame's hoping for. There's no doubt that, but like I guarantee you, Dame's sitting somewhere right now and he's like, "Holy shit!" Like
Giannis.
I have the best defensive front line in the league behind me. So like I can get away with shit defensively that I've gotten away with my entire career. Okay, I can't keep running pick and roll and ISO. I can throw the ball to Chris Middleton and he can, do some of the over the top shot making that I haven't had next to me over the years.
I'm not playing with another 6'1"
was
guy.
Supposed to be. Yeah, I'm not playing with another 6'1" guy. Like, dude, this is wow. I will say, like, specifically from a basketball standpoint, I don't think you could construct a more naturally fitting duo than Dame with an elite defensive front line, a ball screen threat in Giannis, the pressure being off of Dame to, because like the thing with Dame is like he's this unbelievable shot maker. I've always argued, and Warriors fans think I'm crazy, but I actually think Dame is just as good or very close to as good as Steph on the ball. It's everything else that separates Steph. It's his willingness to work off the ball. It's his willingness to compete on the defensive end of the floor. It's his willingness to rebound and do all those things. Which
is all very important.
Absolutely. But on the ball, there's still there aren't many players in NBA history who are as effective as Dame on the ball. And so like putting him in that situation, think about all the playoff games we've watched with Milwaukee over the years that have gotten into slow down situations, and Giannis is tired because he's been a bull in a china shop for the last 8 minutes in a shift. And then like it just turns into Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday taking really tough shots and missing them most of the time. You know, like that's the thing, is you're now throwing into this mix the incredible high level shot maker you need. Like Denver I'll give you an example. Denver fans are like a little bit, they're riding a little too high right now because they're just convinced they're going to repeat, you know? And every time all you have to do is look back in NBA history and look like, oh, like the Warriors thought they were going to repeat after 2018, and then an injury derailed them, right? Like obviously the Raptors quietly, but it's like the 2020 Lakers came into the next season thinking they were going to repeat. They had all the juice coming out of that season, and then injuries ripped them apart. 2021 Bucks, they come into the next season. Giannis is best player in the world. We're the best team in the league. We're going to repeat. Chris Middleton gets hurt and you lose, right? Like there's but like with the Nuggets, what I always say is like everyone looks at it as like it's just a bunch of role players and Jokic, but if you take one of those guys out, it throws the entire mix off. Like if KCP gets hurt, and then it turns into Christian Braun at the 2 and you can help off of him, it could throw off the entire math of their entire offense. And that's the thing. Like it just think of that in reverse. Upgrading Drew Holiday, an inconsistent offensive player, into potentially one of the best on-ball creators in the league. It just completely shifts the math of the entire offense. I don't think people are really aware yet of just how much this is going to open things up for Giannis. Because like the base scheme for your defense is going to have to be containing Dame and pick and roll. That's your base scheme. Yeah. And then Giannis is literally going to be the beneficiary of all of that.
Yeah. With Drew, I love Drew. I think he's almost like the prototypical elite point guard to sit next to, or like in his prime. He's kind of slowed down a little bit, but like in his prime, he was like the prototypical point guard to play next to an elite wing. Right. He's not going to be your best player. If he's like your second or third-ish best player, you got a really good team. And I really like Drew. But to your point, Milwaukee is already so solid defensively. Giannis is such a freak. Brook Lopez is such an elite rim protector. Chris Middleton is nice and long. Pat Connaughton, who I think would probably start at or Carter. Either of those guys get after it defensively. You have more than enough to make up for what Dame doesn't bring on that side of the court. And then on the offensive side of the court, you have he's going to be hitting shots from Lambeau. And they're going to be and there's just like nothing a lot of these teams are going to be able to do about it. And so while so many, defenses are going to be rightly focused on how do we stop Dame from going full Dame time, all that's going to let is Giannis to get the ball in the half court with a running start. There's nothing on earth that can stop that. That's the unstoppable force. So yeah, that is this is like the perfect situation for Dame, I think. Even if he wanted Miami, I think this is the perfect situation for him to arrive in. And I would put them. I think I've been a little iffy on Boston's offseason all summer. I've been waiting to see what Milwaukee would do to just kind of like freshen things up a little bit. Giannis has been kind of hinting at that too. Like there is nobody in the NBA universe happier than the Bucks or Bucks fans today, because this solves the Giannis thing. You're now title favorites, I think. I think when they're
going to be the favorites. I bet you they're the favorites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you piss, and then for the rest of the league, like we all get to laugh at Miami today. Like, how great is that? we all get to
like. This is the one trade outcome too that I think still qualifies as not being a dick to Dame for no reason. You know what I mean? Too like
Yeah.
all of the other destinations, because Toronto was the big buzz over the last couple of days, and it's like Toronto could add Dame straight up without having to pay a single player, and I'm still like Dame, OG Anunoby, Siakam,
4-5
Scotty
seed.
Barnes, and Pirtle, like that's not as good as Boston, right? You know, like
Yeah.
and some of these other destinations you've seen thrown out. And so it actually made sense to be like, look, like Dame's given you 11 years of service, like send him to Miami, like send him to where he wants to go. This is a destination where it's like, hey, thank us later when you have a championship next summer. Like this is overnight championship favorite. The only complaint you could have is the market situation, but like, oh, dude, like this is what? And honestly, we were just talking about a boring NBA offseason, man. How about us, man? We willed it into existence just like that.
Yeah, there's
I'm checking the sports book right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just marveling at how quickly
Bucks
this
are the
stuff can
championship
shift.
favorite at plus 425. They are the Denver Nuggets are at plus 475. The Celtics plus 500. So, like, literally, they have the Nuggets, Bucks, and Celtics all right next to each other, and the Suns only a little bit behind that. Lakers plus 1,200 seems like some value, don't you think?
I'd probably still wait a little bit, wait for like the LeBron hammy pull, and then that drops
exactly.
to like plus 2,000, and then I think I would probably put some money on it. But yeah, this is wild. I said that when we were getting ready to do this, I said begrudgingly, maybe we'll get some Dame talking. I think the title of this is going to be what's to do, or what does this mean for the rest of the league? Oh. This is incredible, but yeah, I think importantly, I guess for those Lakers fans who are tuning in right now, Dame's out of the West. He did not go to a Western Conference team. The Blazers get worse. They're now talking about. I think Woj said a second ago that they are getting ready to shift Drew to a team where he can win more than he would be winning right now in Portland. Deandre Ayton.
So Drew did end up in Portland in the deal.
Yes, yeah. So Sean,
that's right, because they jumped Nurkic as well, so they would have had to match literally like 60 million in salary or 70 million. That makes sense. Yeah,
right. So the Bucks get Dame, Blazers get Drew and Ayton, and then Kamara, and then Kamara and the 2029 first round Bucks pick and a Bucks pick swap, and then the Suns get Nurkic, Little, Keon Johnson, and Grayson Allen. So actually, I kind of like this return for the Suns. I think Nurkic, they're going to miss Ayton's mobility quite a bit compared to Nurkic. Nurkic just feels like the kind of center that teams would employ to be 6 fouls against Shaq for a while there.
Mm-hmm.
But like they shore up. My big concern with the Suns heading into the season were like, who are their perimeter guys who are going to do the little things, especially defensively? And you do get Grayson Allen to do some of that. You do, and that like shores up that a little bit. And it just kind of balances out the roster. But yeah, for the Lakers, in looking at this, you said that I think Vegas had them at 5th right now. It's kind of like the clear second
Actually, it's
team.
6th, I think. So you're talking about the Lakers, right?
Yeah. So you have the Bucks.
Yeah, they're at 6th.
Yeah, so you have the Bucks, did you go Suns, Nuggets, or Nuggets? Suns?
Okay, they just shifted because they just dropped the Heat's odds. So it's Bucks plus 425, Nuggets plus 475, Celtics plus 500, Suns plus 650, Lakers plus 1,200. They are in 5th. And then the Warriors are right behind the Lakers at plus 1,300, which is crazy. Like the Lakers are clearly, they should be viewed as a better team than the Warriors going into the season. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would have them closer to that plus 500-ish group than to the plus 1,200. So to your original point, there is, I think, some value right now. I still think I would wait a little bit, but yeah, we were going to talk about like the Lakers' identity and all that, and I promise we are going to get to that. But this is the biggest story of the offseason, right? It just flat out is. And I can't fathom how poorly Miami played this. It is crazy to me how poorly they played this. It reminds me, frankly, of how Magic Johnson handled the first set of AD trade negotiations with New Orleans, where he started those negotiations offering like Rondo and some crappy contracts and maybe a pick. And his reason for doing so was like, nobody else is offering anything. AD's forcing his way here soon anyway. So you may as well get this done and get whatever you possibly can for him. And Demps at the time basically said, nah, we'll play out this season and we'll talk again in the offseason. And, fortunately for the Lakers, no other team really swooped in for AD. In this case, for Miami, I kind of think Pat Riley took a similar approach where he was like, nobody else is making any offers. You'll take Tyler Hero's contract and you'll like it. And Portland said, we can wait, And unfortunately for Miami, a team really swooped in here in Milwaukee. Nobody heard about Milwaukee. Not a single person I have spoken to thought had Milwaukee on their radar. And that's just kind of how these things go. Eventually, just like it did with the Paul George trade in Indiana, where he was leaving Indiana, he was going to be a Laker, and then he wasn't. And then he goes to OKC, and the gamble OKC is making is maybe he'll re-up. Maybe he'll like it here enough that he'll stick around. And eventually he did. And I think here for Milwaukee, this is a great gamble. This is an outrageous gamble for them that they can basically say, all right, Dame, I think you're going to like playing with Giannis. Giannis, I think you're going to like playing with Dame. Both of you can stick around here for the next 5 years or so, and we'll see where we are after that. I love the way Milwaukee is handling this, and I really think Pat Riley messed this up completely.
Well, I think he was negotiating from a position of leverage where he thought there's no way that Portland would send Dame to somewhere that was significantly worse of a situation than what we have. I don't think he saw any position or situation materialize that would have threatened them in that way. And so it basically came down to obviously Portland wants to find a return that makes more sense with their timeline and their situation. And they've got their three core young players are guards: Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, and Scoot Henderson, right? So bringing in Tyler Herro into that situation doesn't make any sense. Now you're talking about redirecting him to third teams, which are only going to bring other forms of salary filler back. So it just didn't make a ton of sense. But Pat Riley just was banking on the fact that the simple, the desire to not be vindictive would prevent Portland from doing that. And what I don't think he ever conceptualized as a threat here was that Portland would be able to do both. And that's what they did. They were able to send Dame to legitimately not just a position that's as good as the Miami situation, but I'd argue better than the Miami situation.
Oh, yeah.
So he sent Dame to a better winning situation and pulled back something that I think they view as a foundational piece in DeAndre Ayton. I think they view him as the anchor on both ends of the floor. Nurkic has availability issues and he has defensive issues. You put now DeAndre Ayton obviously has his own defensive issues, but in theory, when he's engaged, he's a capable defensive player and he's an awesome screen and roll big with great hands who finishes everything around the basket. Could you conceptualize a better idea for a player to put next to Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe over the next few years? Probably not.
Yep.
So I think in a weird way, Pat was banking on the status quo set of options being all that was out there. And clearly, and credit to the staffs involved too, because this is not the first time we've seen this before, but we always hear all these rumors and shit.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear any of this. This
None.
came out of nowhere. And so credit to the Bucks and credit to the Blazers for navigating this situation and working out a deal and keeping it underneath the radar so that they could scoop Dame away from Pat Riley. Honestly, it was really well executed on that front.
Yeah, I can't wait for, you always get those pieces about how these deals come together, and you always get the minor details that come up that eventually Milwaukee basically, when they said enough is enough, right? And look, Giannis, he has been pretty vocal, especially by Giannis' standards this summer, about, hey, I love being a Buck, but I am a winner. I'm a winner before I'm a Buck, and all of that stuff. And he was kind of, in his own super duper nice way, saying hey, we're going to do something eventually, right? We're not going to keep running this thing back because they were going to be based. And look, it was a fairly successful offseason, I think, for the Bucks in that they were able to bring everybody back. That was before they went out and got Dame. And I could also see why Giannis would say, I've watched this movie a few times. We're good here. Can we get some other pieces in here? And I think the biggest part of all of this, the biggest impact made around the league, is that I would imagine this placates Giannis. And this guy who I know the Lakers have been kind of looking to the side. Like, I laughed the other day at the report that there was this list of teams that are closely monitoring Giannis. I'm like, 29 other teams are closely monitoring Giannis.
Exactly.
Every other team is watching for what happens here. But now, I would imagine now that Milwaukee has kind of proven to Giannis, hey, here's this guy. Here's this guy. I believe, this is from Chris Haynes, where he said that in a Fresno barbershop called Phase the Second a few months ago, Giannis Antetokounmpo was asked of the one player he would like to play with. His response was Damian Lillard. So, they got him the guy that he really, really wants to play with. So the fact that now Giannis is probably off of the table for the foreseeable future, that to me, even beyond the basketball impact this year, that to me is the giant wave that's going to send ripples across the next few years in the NBA.
They've done a nice job identifying the 2 times that Giannis was getting a little antsy. And that, because that was when the Drew Holiday trade came down. Remember, he was starting to get a little antsy, and then came the Drew Holiday trade, right? Which led to a title, by the way. And immediately, I think it happened the first year.
That's a great point.
So you have the kind of a similar vibe here. We've started to get some of those quotes coming out of the woodwork. Giannis talking about what he would do in the long run, and they identified it and they made a move. And that's to me, kind of the whole point to why I wanted Portland to take care of Dame is they had given Dame. We can all agree that Dame is not a perfect superstar, but he's very, very good. And there are lesser players than him in NBA history that have been able to overcome and win an NBA championship. And so my thing is it got to the point where he had given them so many chances in that regard that it was actually time for him to go have an opportunity to play somewhere. And I think we too frequently look this part over, which is the small market team can't hang on to the star. And it's they usually do when they give the star what he needs to compete. It's really that simple. Giannis is not going to leave Milwaukee because they've given him what he needs to compete. They've done a nice job of hanging on to assets and hanging on to the flexibility necessary to pounce on opportunities when they arise. And so guess what? Giannis is probably going to be a Buck for the rest of his career. And I would even argue that they've they've created a certain margin for error with Giannis now too, because they've now come through for him in a big way twice. And so if he has a couple of rough years, 4 or 5 years from now, there's no reason for him not to trust that they'll do it again. And I think that the Bucks have just done an awesome job of demonstrating the proper process to succeed as a smaller market team.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of happy that, because I don't think Dame or his camp handled this particularly well. I think had he
of course not.
I think if he would have gone to Portland and given them a list of teams, 3 or 4 teams, that Portland would have maintained enough leverage to get more out of Miami than Miami was willing to offer up, Dame would have been in Miami forever ago, and this would have all been taken care of. But I'm actually glad that despite not handling it that well, Dame does find himself in this opportunity to win because of the point that you just made a second ago, that he has given Portland ample opportunity over the course of his career to course correct, right? The CJ McCollum thing wasn't happening. It wasn't working. They waited 2 years too long on that. And then even after they moved away from CJ McCollum, they brought in another tiny little guard that makes it really difficult to compete. And I think I'm happy that Dame, being the competitor that he is, and having spent so much time in Portland, not running from the grind, gets the opportunity now to step into a ready-made championship team that, frankly, I don't think he would have been on in Miami. They would have been really good, but not clearly ahead of the field the way this team looks. I agree with you. Yeah, I'm happy for Dame in that he actually kind of benefits from him bumbling the process to this point. That like he just like it's like an accident that he just happens to go to where he needs to go to right now. And now arrives at the championship type of contender that he's been really and frankly, I as an NBA fan have wanted to see Dame in this situation.
Mm-hmm. No, me too. I 100% agree. I think you did a really nice job of hitting on like the Portland thing where it just seemed from a structural standpoint, they never gave him what he needed. Like if I told you I've got the one of the best on-ball guards in the league, but that he's a small guard that has some physical limitations, what would you think of as the ideal way to build around him? You'd immediately say dominant defensive front line. Like, end of story. That's what you would need, a dominant defensive front line. I mean, we literally saw this. Yeah, we literally saw this with Golden State. Like the entire structure of the defense is like we had Draymond Green, who was one of the best defensive fulcrums of this era. We had Andre Iguodala, who was one of the best perimeter defenders of this era. And then, down the roster, we had guys role players that competed on the defensive end of the floor.
And even Clay was a really good defender. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the dirty little secret about even the early Warriors teams from 2015, 2016 on, is they always were elite defensive teams with as much focus as there was on Steph. And so like, that's the thing is like, even as we look at back in NBA history, Jokic Gordon is probably the worst defensive front line to win a title in the last 20 years. I don't know if I would argue LeBron, Tristan Thompson was a better defensive front line than those two guys. Right. So like in terms of overall versatility and stuff. So like, they're the exception, but as we go back in NBA history, every champion has this like epic defensive front line. And so like at a certain point, you have to build that for Dame, and they just never did. They never, ever, ever gave him even a competent defensive front line, let alone the type of defensive front line that could allow him to contend for championships. And like, it's funny because that overwhelming offensive firepower has the ability to push you over the top, but only when you have basic fundamental foundational things. And Portland just never established those. And even the one time they had a good deep playoff run going into that conference final series with the Warriors, it was literally because Dame went absolutely nuclear in the first round and CJ McCollum went absolutely nuclear in the second round until they ran into a team in Golden State that was able to contain them. So like it just was one of those things where it was well overdue. And I agree with you. Like, again, I wanted my opinion on Dame getting sent where he deserved to go, so to speak, was not supposed to alleviate any sort of blame or fair criticism of the way he handled it, because obviously the antics they pulled behind the scenes were not great. My whole thing was like this is not James Harden or Kyrie Irving. This is not a dude flexing a situation and taking advantage of a franchise. This is the opposite of that. Dame has earned that type of situation from the franchise. But like you're right. I mean, behind the scenes, it wasn't pretty, but this is the ideal outcome. Portland got something that makes sense for their current timeline. They got a fulcrum for both ends of the floor, a great pick and roll partner for their guards, a great not great, but a solid defensive fulcrum. And then they managed to send Dame to a situation where he has a bona fide chance to win a championship. Everybody's happy. This is ideal. Except for Miami. Like I said, don't be surprised if they do something crazy here. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if they make a move for Drew Holiday. Don't be surprised if they make a move for Drew Holiday just strikes me as like the perfect Miami Heat guy, doesn't he? But it's like, do you want Tyler Hero now? To Portland. I know you didn't like him last week, but how about now?
Imagine Portland now calling Miami. Hey, any interest in Drew Holiday? Like how quick Pat Riley would just, Well,
don't be surprised if they go after something crazy like James Harden either, or like maybe it's like someone like Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan, somebody along those lines.
LaVine has always felt like a Miami guy. He just like strikes me as a Miami guy. Mm-hmm. Well, look, completely threw out the plan for this show, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So all that means is that we're going to have to bring you back here another time.
Yeah, let's talk about Lakers. The Lakers. Let's talk Lakers later on in camp. Yeah,
we'll talk Lakers. By that time, we will talk Ahsoka after it will have wrapped, I would imagine. Jason, you do a great job for the volume. Hoops Tonight is where you can tune into his show and do so on a nightly basis. Again, great stuff there. Also, the Two Sons podcast where you talk about Star Wars is also fantastic. Thanks very, very much for hopping on. Apologies for trying to handle all of this on the air live and stuff. But this has been a blast as always.
Dude, this was fun, and all it means is we have to do another show before the end of camp. So we'll talk Lakers and Ahsoka later on. I'm looking forward to it, man. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's unbelievable.